Trust the wait, embrace the uncertainty, enjoy the beauty of becoming. When nothing is certain, anything is possible. Good evening and welcome. This is Face the Nation. We are joined by three members of parliament this evening on the show. Our topic of discussion today is economy in dire straits amidst political tug of war. Joining us this evening on the show are Mano Ganeshan, leader of the Tamil Progressive Alliance and member of parliament; Rauf Hakim, leader of the Sri Lanka Muslim Congress and also member of parliament; and M.A. Sumandiran, President's Council, member of parliament of the Tamil National Alliance. Now, we did invite member of parliament from the national list, Harin Fernando, who is the new Minister of Land and Tourism, to the show this morning as well. Unfortunately, we did give ample time for Minister Harin Fernando, at least a week or so, to decide or not whether he wants to come on the show. But this morning, the minister decided that he wanted to opt out. Time and tide wait for no man. We decided to start the show without the minister himself. But if the minister was present today, we would have been able to get some answers to the problems that are faced by the general public at large. However, tonight, let's start off the show with Member of Parliament and leader of the Sri Lanka Muslim Congress, Rauf Hakim. Mr. Hakim, interestingly, many are saying that because the Samaka Jana Balawege is an alliance, the post of Prime Minister was lost to Ranil Wickremesinghe. Is it so?
In fact, the equation in Parliament and the leader of the opposition's position is given to someone who has the most number of members in the opposition, and that's how Mr. Sajith Premadasa is considered the leader of the opposition. The fact anyway is that...
No, I'm referring to the post of Prime Minister, which was given to Ranil Wickremesinghe, member of Parliament, a couple of weeks ago by President Gotabaya Rajapaksa when he was appointed as a Prime Minister. Do you think that leader of the opposition, Sajith Premadasa, lost the contest because he was engulfed with a number of other political parties as well when taking a decision to be the Prime Minister?
No, in taking the decision, he did consult us, and then our advice to him was that provided the President agrees to the conditions that we had laid down, that he could go ahead and accept it, despite the fact that numbers-wise we will have certain difficulties in carrying on having a majority, in the sense we will be caught up in a situation where we will depend on other members from other parties who are defected to the opposition, as well as some in the government, to have a simple majority. But with all those inhibitions, we in fact advised Mr. Premadasa, if the President agrees to the conditions that we all agreed in consultation with each other, that he should take the challenge. He was in fact prepared to do that, but this particular issue of having a definite timeline for the President to quit was the issue in which there was no agreement, and therefore Mr. Premadasa opted out.
So, Mr. Hakim, you say that you did tell him that that is leader of the opposition, Sajith Premadasa, take the challenge. Are you all disgruntled with the fact that the leader of the opposition did not take up the challenge when he was given that position by the President himself?
No, I mean, by hindsight, we can see, and though people may think that he should have risen up to the challenge and should have taken it when it was offered to them, I always consider that the offer was a left-handed offer. To say it within inverted commas, because for all purposes I was quite convinced that it was only plan B of the government. Plan A was to install Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe. That was their preferred choice. However, they wanted to, for optics purposes, they wanted to offer it to Mr. Premadasa, so that knowing very well, given the pitfalls ahead, that he might not latch on to the offer. So finally, they implemented the plan A they wanted to implement, and that was what I feel, though people outside may think that he had let go of an opportunity that was given to him. It is quite obvious, because it is seen as a very now when you see Mr. Ranil Wickramasinghe's position, he is in a very weak position, because he is the single member of his party in parliament, and having to depend on Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna and some dissidents from Podujana Peramuna to cobble together a majority. You cannot expect much from a Prime Minister with such a difficult position. So that is why we felt what would have been ideal was to go by the Bar Association proposal and to have an all-party government. If we are to have an all-party government, that should have been at least an effort to install an apolitical person as a Prime Minister, if Mr. Premadasa was not willing to take it up.
So, being a major constituent party of the SJB, if leader of the opposition Sajid Premadasa took over the post of Prime Minister, today I probably would be addressing you as Minister. Don't you think so?
No, even if Mr. Premadasa was willing to take it, some of us had inhibitions of taking on ministerial portfolios unless it is an all-party government. Because what we were told, and in fact Mr. Sumandran will bear witness to this, in a private discussion he had, I don't know whether I am entitled to say this, with the President. He had told Mr. Sumandran that the offer was made to Mr. Sajid Premadasa on the condition that he will be the Prime Minister and he will be entitled to nominate only 4 members of the cabinet out of 20. The rest of it, the President will retain the power to nominate the rest. So that would mean that the President from the outset did not have a very sincere intention of allowing the Prime Minister to form his own cabinet.
So I just want to interrupt you here for a second here, Mr. Hakim. Because Mr. Sumandran's name was mentioned, can you take responsibility for that statement that was made by Mr. Hakim with regard to President's statement to you?
Yeah, well, that was communicated to me. I wouldn't want to say that it was told to me directly, but certain communication took place between the President and myself with regard to him stepping down. In the course of that, there was mention that SJB can be given 4 ministerial positions out of 20.
Right. So getting back to Mr. Hakim, just want to clarify that we won't take any responsibility for the statements that are made by panelists this evening. The onus would be on the 3 panelists who are making statements today on the show. Getting back into the position of the Sri Lanka Muslim Congress with regard to all this what's happening right now, 21st Amendment to the Constitution with regard to reviving the country's economy, then there is talk about holding an election promptly and taking a referendum from the people, a mandate from the people to know whether or not the political parties have the mandate from the people to be in power. With regard to all this, what is the position of the Sri Lanka Muslim Congress?
No, we believe, along with many other parties, that at a time of such a serious crisis, where there is a serious economic crisis as well as a political crisis, it is incumbent on all of us to put our shoulder to the wheel and form an all-party government. So we made a very sincere effort towards that. When we mean all-party government, that doesn't mean that party leaders must necessarily take up ministerial positions. We could have nominated people to go up there, whoever is willing to take up positions. But then, we could have implemented a program with all parties being involved in trying to formulate a proper economic policy to take this country out of this mess. But unfortunately, this effort to form an all-party government rests upon the confidence we can have in the President's undertaking to abide by certain demands that has been put before him, particularly his mandate is under question, and he has to take responsibility for most of these wrong decisions that have already been taken. So in this backdrop, it is essential that we must see his willingness to quit office, at least a timeline for that. So that was not forthcoming with when people in Galle and all these protesters are demanding, their primary demand is for the President to quit. So having asked the Prime Minister to go alone, he cannot satisfy this primary requirement, and also we feel the executive presidency itself has now come into serious criticism. So therefore we have to have a rethink about the entire structure, and that is what is now being attempted by presenting bills to amend the Constitution.
Mr. Hakim, you're also a very prolific lawyer. You know very well that constitutionally the President does not need to leave office until his term of office expires. So in a situation like that, is it fair for the opposition parties to request or demand that the President leave office, or give a time frame for that?
No, you see, it was only a bargaining position as far as we are concerned, but then we were prepared to go by what the Bar Association had proposed, you see, and that Bar Association was very clear in their proposals, and they also felt that there is no possibility for the President to immediately quit, but there must be a clear time frame where he will indicate his willingness to quit. So that entire proposal by the Bar Association was incumbent upon, or rather insistent upon the necessity for President to give a definite timeline for him to quit from office.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rauf Hakim, leader of the Sri Lanka Muslim Congress and also Member of Parliament. I now move my attention to Mano Ganeshan, leader of the Tamil Progressive Alliance and also Member of Parliament. Mr. Ganeshan, again, I will pose the same question that I posed to Mr. Hakim with regard to not accepting the post of Prime Minister when the opportunity was given. Isn't your party disgruntled about it?
No. Shamir, now I have been listening to you, a question and the response of my good friend Rauf here. Must make it very categorically clear one thing, that is the decision of Samagya Jana Balawegi or the SJB alliance had been a collective decision. It's not just Sajid Premadas's decision or SJB alone. It is collective agreement, collective decision we had made. The very first condition, there are 4 conditions, no, as you know. Very first condition is talking about a time frame, as he said clearly, time frame. We requested time frame from the President. Because
we agree with all this, but didn't this letter come late? Because we know on the day that we are talking about, the evening prior, Ranil Wickremesinghe had met President Gotabaya Rajapaksa, and that morning only this particular letter was issued by around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and by 6:30 in the evening on that particular day, which was Wednesday or Thursday, if I may recollect right, Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe to go. So all these conditions are very well in the public domain.
Let me say something. Now, Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe is a single person in the Parliament. It was one MP. But as far as our SJB is concerned, we are the biggest opposition party, opposition alliance. So we have more than four component parties: SJB, TPA, SLMC, ACMC. So we need to consult everybody. We need time. Maybe it is not the case of the Ranil Wickremesinghe. And again, the invitation from the President also came very late. As Rauf Hakim said now, I heard him saying that it had been already, the decision had been already made to install Mr. Vikram Singh as the Prime Minister. We understood that. So we had our position very clear. There are four conditions. One starting with this condition as the time frame, and other following other three conditions. So they were not accepted by the president. So we can't do anything. Whereas in the case of Ranil Vikram Singh, they mustn't have any conditions. I don't know about it, but I can just say it's my guess, a good guess. Mustn't have been any conditions. On the other hand, there must have been conditions from the Rajapaksas to him. Maybe, I don't know.
But Mr. Ganeshan, isn't it sad that from the 4 members of the national list that was awarded to the Samagya Jana Balawegaya, 2 of the members have already crossed over to the government, that is Diana Gamage and Harin Fernando. And now the SJB is left with only 2 members from the national list. And it's very sad, isn't it?
No, it is sad, obviously sad. It's sad. That's right, fine. But anyway, it is nationalist or otherwise. They had been elected through SJB, obviously. That happens always, no, in this country. Happens, no. We're sad about it. We're sad about it. Because they will say everybody should stick to the party decision. It is not so. It does not happen so. So that is sad. Yes, I agree. Yes, it's sad. Sad to the democracy in this country.
Now, what is the position of the Tamil Progressive Alliance with regard to holding an election promptly now? Do you think an election should be held immediately to test the mandate of the people?
Yes, ultimately that would be the solution for all this. We'll have to seek a new mandate from the people.
Now, what I don't understand, Mr. Ganeshan, is a lot of opposition parties are saying that we should go for an election immediately. But looking at the economic crisis that is plaguing this nation at the moment, many are also of the view that why an election when we don't even have gas, when we don't even have fuel, when we have to stay in a queue to buy our essentials. We don't even, right now if you go to the supermarket to buy a kilo of dal, it's going at around 640 rupees a kilo. A kilo of tomatoes are being sold at 800, 900 rupees. A coconut alone is around 250 to 300 rupees right now in the market. So
I understand. We have a crisis
at this moment.
No, I understand. We have a crisis. How to come out of the crisis? Because we need the international support. Why it is not coming in? I had the British Prime Minister had spoken to the our Prime Minister hours before. What did he say? He has spoken about some Sri Lanka being transformed as an export-oriented country. So long distance goals. Even World Bank has said that the government should come out with the economical plan. Nobody is offering immediate cash financial support. Why is it? Because nobody has confidence. Take the remittance from the Sri Lankan expatriates who are living in the Middle East, working in the Middle East and elsewhere. It has gone down very much down. Because our own people do not have any confidence in the country. Do not have confidence on the government of the day. Why is it? So we need to have a administration, whatever you call administration or government or presidential office or whatever said and done. Should have gain the confidence. No confidence. So what is the alternative? We have to seek a new mandate for the people.
Now, Mr. Ganeshan, most of the people who we speak to on the streets, you may also be well aware, they don't want all 225 members in parliament right now. They want renewed people. What would that leave your political party?
I don't believe that. That is just a hearsay and people talk here and there. That's all. It is not so. And me, Mano Ganeshan, leader of the TPA, I didn't vote for 20th Amendment, neither 18th Amendment. No, I have not sold myself. I have never been part of Rajapaksa's cabinet. Even this time, when the 20th Amendment came in, the port city came in, there will be a lot of offers here and there. So we registered everything. We are standing on our own. Even now, we have invitations, open invitations to join the government. We are not doing that.
But you also took a reversal when you were in the previous government as well with regard to a policy decision that was taken. Remember?
Pardon?
There was a policy decision that was taken with regard to pardoning one of the former ex-parliamentarians.
Yes.
And your party also took a complete U-turn on that. Remember?
Yes. But anyway, we withdrew it. Anyway,
yeah, subsequently.
Immediately. Subsequently, we withdrew it. When it was, we realized it's a mistake, we withdrew it. That is the only thing we did. Nothing else. We have been always straight.
Yeah. We will talk more, Mr. Maneka.
Yes.
We have nearly 2 hours of time today, so we have a lot of questions from Mr. Hakim and you, and also Member of Parliament Sumandaran, President's Council. We now move our attention to the representative from the Tamil National Lands. Mr. Mandaran, now we know when we speak about constitution, law, you are a very celebrated lawyer. You know exactly the ins and outs of constitutional law. It's almost on the fingertips of you as an individual. I don't know about your political party in question, but you as an individual, you are very well versed with regard to the constitutionality of the 21st Amendment or so on and so forth. What is the position of your political party right now with regard to the 21st Amendment to the Constitution?
Yeah. Firstly, I must clarify what is meant by the 21st Amendment. Officially, there is one private member's bill now in Parliament. First reading is over, and the matter is now being in the Supreme Court being argued as to whether it requires a referendum or not, and that is called the 21st Amendment, submitted by Honorable Ranjit Madhuva Mandara as a private member's bill. Our party is in full support of that bill that is now pending in Parliament.
Right. Ms. Mandaran, with regard to the support that your political party has towards Ranil Wickremesinghe as a Prime Minister, now we recollect several years ago when an impeachment motion was to be tabled against Ranil Wickremesinghe as a Prime Minister, your political party went ahead and supported the candidature of Ranil Wickremesinghe in Parliament. Has that position changed now?
See, our party stands on principles, not behind personalities. So when Mr. Wickremesinghe was on the right side, we supported him because our principle is to support democratic governance. Right now, Mr. Wickremesinghe is on the wrong side of democracy. So our principle remains the same. We are for democracy. So we are not very happy that Mr. Wickremesinghe was sworn in as Prime Minister against all democratic norms.
You in fact slammed Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe in Parliament with regard to one of the motions that was tabled in Parliament as well. So your party stand now is against Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe and the SLPP as a whole, or what exactly is it? Because that's not clear.
This needs to be clarified, Shamir. Yeah. We don't take a position of I am against so and so. We take positions, as I said, based on certain principles. Now, there were two issues on which Parliament voted on that day. The first was significant, was the Deputy Speaker's election. Prime Minister Wickremesinghe had just taken over as Prime Minister, and he proposed the previous day that we must have a woman as a Deputy Speaker. Now, SJB had previously decided to field the same person, Imtiaz Bakir Maka, as a candidate for Deputy Speaker. But when they heard the Prime Minister say this, they changed their candidate, and they said Rohini Kaviratne would be a candidate. Then Mr. Wickremesinghe said, let the Women's Caucus in Parliament decide who the candidate is. So, Women's Caucus President Dr. Sudashini Fernandes-Pulle, before the vote, stood up and said, vote for Rohini Kaviratne, she is our candidate. So, Prime Minister Wickremesinghe's requirement that a woman be made the Deputy Speaker was made known very clearly, and a woman was nominated, and as per his wish, by the Women's Caucus in Parliament as well. What happened? All those who sat with him in the government benches voted against his candidate. That's the Prime Minister we have today. How does anybody want the opposition to support him when the government members all together opposed his candidate? So this is the mockery of democracy. And the next vote was whether to take up a motion that expresses a censure motion against the president to be debated that day. We would have probably had about half a day to debate that. That encapsulated in it the whole issue that is before the country today as to who is responsible for this economic calamity. That had to be debated. What did the other members, government members want? They wanted to debate as to how their houses got burnt and so on. Now those are very important issues, I don't deny. But which takes precedence? Eventually it turned out that 4 full days they cried about their houses being burnt. They are representatives of the people after all. They should give priority to discussing people's issues, not their houses. So that is what I called a shameless behavior. Shameless behavior by the members of the government. And I also said, and the Prime Minister also supported that shameless behavior, and therefore the Prime Minister's behavior was also shameless.
So you said earlier, Mr. Swandaran, that Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe is standing in the wrong side of democracy.
Yep.
Is he standing in the wrong side of history, and what would your party's decision be with regard to taking a decision when it comes to overall activities right now in the country?
You see, we are a party that doesn't work on political expediency. The country should know that by now. We don't take executive office or we don't run behind it.
And you all have never intimated that either.
Sorry?
You all have never intimated that either, saying that you all are running for the executive position of the
and even country. When it was offered in 2015 to 2019 government, several times it was offered, we did not take it. That's based on some certain policy. Now, I am saying that because you asked a question about whether it would be the wrong side of history. We are not too bothered about how things will turn out. Should we have done this wrong thing so that we will end up on the right side? No. Even if we end up on the wrong side and we are rejected by the people for that, we would still do what we know to be the right thing. So we make our decision based on those principles.
Where do you all stand now?
So our stand now is the country has hit an all-time low economically. It's very clear as to who is responsible for that. The President is primarily responsible for that. President is primarily responsible for that. He announced tax cuts in his election campaign, and the then Minister of Finance, that time itself, Mangala Samaravira said, if you do that, we'll end up like Lebanon and Venezuela. It's a recorded fact. But he went ahead and did that in December 2019. That was the immediate cause that spiraled this country down to where we are today. Right? So he's responsible. Not only that fact, he has even owned up. He has said, my decision on chemical fertilizer was wrong. He has said, my decision to delay going to IMF for help was wrong. The next sentence should have been, therefore I resign. That's a democratic tradition. I mean, why did the central bank governor resign? Why did the secretary to the treasury resign? Pray, why did the Prime Minister resign? When it is all because of the actions of the President.
The buck has to stop somewhere.
Yeah, buck stops with the President. And in this instance, he is directly responsible. He himself owns up. So our party's position is quite plain, quite clear, that the President must step down. You can't run the country saying there is an economic calamity, there is an economic crisis, so don't upset anything, by keeping the person who is responsible for that calamity in that office.
Right.
You
so
never do that.
Let's say hypothetically President steps down, then what?
The Constitution has made provision for that. the Prime Minister steps in for a few days, the Parliament must then elect a new President. Our position is also, not only has the President lost his mandate, it's quite clear. Never have our country faced a situation where over 50 days people stand outside. He is unable to enter his office. For more than 50 days, the President is unable to enter his office. Right? He has lost his mandate. It's not only the President, the Parliament has lost its mandate. It's quite clear. Today you have an election, SLPP won't get even 20 seats. They now control 2/3. All those who said we have now become independent, then when that independence was questioned, they crossed the floor, but then they vote with the government. Now they go back and take positions in government. All that was a small drama to fool the people. So they have 2/3 of the numbers in Parliament. That is not the will of the people now. People have come out and said, we made a mistake in electing these guys.
Right.
Send them home. So Parliament has lost its mandate. President has lost its mandate. So both must change. For any stability in the country, for economic stability, what you need fundamentally is political stability. For political stability, you need a fresh mandate from the people. You can't gainsay that at all.
Right. Very quickly, Ms. Vandana, before I move on to my two journalists to pose questions to the panelists today, there was a tweet by Minister Harin Fernando against you, saying that you had tried to intervene a SJB meeting.
That I had barged into an SJB.
Yes, you had apparently. So, do you have a response? If I had Minister Harin Fernando, I probably would have posed that question to both of you. But
no, so
because
I have
of his
two
absence,
leaders of the SJB alliance here who were present at all of those meetings that I attended at the invitation of the SJB leader. More as a legal consultant on constitutional matters than anything else. Other opposition leaders also have attended. Mr. Gajendra Kumar Ponnambalam has attended. When Mr. Andhra Yapa has attended, he's the leader of the opposition. So it's customary sometimes for him to talk to all the parties that are in opposition. Nothing strange about it.
Do you want to?
There was no barging into any meeting. It was always at the invitation of the leader of the opposition.
And I don't think anybody can barge in. I mean, obviously. At the invitation of the Rajiv Premadasa, he can always walk in because it's the office of the leader of the opposition.
Do you want to tell anything in response to that tweet that was made by
I don't think anybody should waste any time on Harin Fernando.
Not anymore?
No, not anymore.
Right. So I open the floor for questions from our journalists. On to my immediate right is Hassan Shazuli, left is Deshan Gonawala. Let's start off with Hassan. Yeah.
Sure. Thanks, Sham. I think let me start with Mr. Sumandiran. Now, a couple of minutes ago, you said that you referred to how parliamentary sessions, as soon as Ranil Wickremesinghe was sworn in as the Prime Minister, how parliamentary sessions went to waste because everyone was debating about how their houses were burnt and they did not discuss the problems of the people. Don't you think that if the Samagijana Balawegya had seized the opportunity and taken in charge, your faction could have done something better in Parliament by discussing the people's problems?
Well, I'm not a member of the Samagijana Balawegya, so I can't answer that question.
Do you think that if the Samagijana Balawegya had seized that opportunity, they would have been able to do something better?
Well, I don't think they could have done any better themselves. You see, as I said, the composition of Parliament is a contradiction today. The composition in Parliament is opposite to what the people think. So that's where this contradiction is. It's a quick decline, but that change is apparent to everybody. So if the Parliament is a house of representatives, we are not those representatives now. I'm including myself in that. You have a fresh election. I'm sure the three of us and many others will be re-elected. our parties will come back stronger than we are in this parliament. I'm absolutely confident of that. But there will be a massive change because people feel that they have been cheated. They thought that this is a technocrat president we are electing, he will solve all the problems. And they found that he has made the biggest mistakes this country has ever seen.
Right. Now we saw the Prime Minister coming out and saying that we don't have money, we don't have, leave alone dollars, we don't have even rupees to pay public sector servants. And we have to print about ₹1 trillion to pay them. Against a backdrop like that, where do we find the money to go in for an election?
Well, that is no argument for not having elections. That's a very dangerous thing.
But we need money to hold an election.
Yeah, I know. I'm starting from that premise. That's no argument not to have elections. Then we won't be a democracy anymore. We'll have wrongdoers in control of the country as we have today. Right? The biggest wrongdoer is the head of government today. That cannot continue. For economic recovery, you need political stability. All these institutions are telling us that. We must ask them for a grant, a special grant for an election, and hold the election so that there will be political stability, a reflection of what the people say in the parliament. That will be a stable parliament. And then from there we can move on.
Right. I need to move to Mr. Hakim as well, because when Shamir questioned Mr. Mano Ganeshan on why the people should place their trust on him and his party, he said that he was not a part of any Rajapaksa administration before, and he gave out certain reasons. Mr. Hakim, you were a minister in the previous government that was voted out by the people in 2019, and you have held ministerial positions under Mahinda Rajapaksa's presidency as well. Why do you think the people should place their trust on politicians of your caliber?
No, may I say this particularly? This is what I went and told Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe as well. Not only me alone, Mr. Sumandaran and Mano Ganeshan too accompanied me when he took over as Prime Minister this time. So there is this fundamental issue when it comes to formation of governments. Particularly in a situation like this, if we are to see a collective effort to pull this country out of this morass we are in, it was incumbent on Mr. Wickremesinghe first to consult the opposition parties before going and taking over the Prime Ministership. Even if he had done so, even at that late stage, our request was to him to avoid poaching members from other parties. Now, this has happened to me earlier also. Smaller parties are always at the risk of a strong government trying to break up parties, poaching members from parties by offering various inducements.
But in 2014, Mr. Hakim, you also switched over just before the election.
My decision to join as a party was because if I hadn't done so, there would have been at least 5 members of my party would have been poached by the then administration. That was the situation in which I had to stoop to conquer later, and which I did subsequently. I defected from that government, and that government finally fell in 2015. Right? I had to take a lot of criticism for that decision, but otherwise I would have had to face this ignominy of being left with just 2 members, whereas 5 others would have quit my party. That was the situation in which I had to join the government and...
But Mr. Hakim, right now, isn't it the same situation that your party is facing at this very moment? Because when we saw the amendment of the 20th Amendment being tabled in Parliament, most of your party members defected.
No,
you stood alone with the SJP. So that is being portrayed by many individuals as a deal itself.
No. But the thing is I must make very clear.
Yeah.
Whatever these members try to say, now we have already expelled 1 member, right, for having joined the government, and the other 3 are already under an inquiry, and then we will proceed with an inquiry, and then if we successfully conclude the inquiry, we can expel them as well if necessary. But You see, now in this position, it is very, very clear that party leader took up a position that was in consonance with the mandate we got, and I stayed put where I refused to vote with the government. They voted with the government, and they finally has to now face the party whip, and they are now facing that, and then none of them could go and face the electorate today. Whereas the party leader could very confidently go. I did when this problem came, even before the Mirihan incident happened. Even before the Mirihan incident happened, I went to my electorate to the eastern province. Of course, I am elected from Kandy district, but as a party leader, had a massive demonstration where members from the TNA, Mr. Mano Ganeshan and others also sent in representatives, and we had a very, very strong demonstration against the government.
So I have a question for you. So, your party and the party of Richard Badiuddin opted to stay with the SJB, while members of your party went ahead and supported the 20th Amendment to the Constitution, right? So why wasn't a decision taken to expel these members immediately after they went and voted in favor of the 20th Amendment to the Constitution? Because a lot of people are saying this also is a political ploy that was rolled out by your party and Vishal Badiuddin's party.
No, we took it step by step. First, we suspended their membership in the party high command, right? Then subsequently, when the next budget came, when the party whip very clearly said not to vote for the budget, they went ahead and voted. They violated the party discipline again. Then we suspended their membership in the party, right? And now an inquiry had been initiated. So, because we had to follow the necessary procedures that are laid down when it comes to the party constitution and party high command, we went by a decision that the high command took to initially suspend the membership on of the high command for those members, and subsequently the membership itself in the party. And now they are all on the mat for having voted for the last budget. So that inquiry one is concluded. I mean, already their mandate is vitiated by the people. They could see that. None of them could very confidently go before the people anymore. And that is a fact they realize. So the party realizes that very well. But of course, we have to follow through with the proper legal procedure. If at all we have to expel them, that we are continuing to do.
Mr. Hakim, do you believe that your party still represents the minority communities in Sri Lanka when it comes to their ideologies, what they want to do, what they wish that needs to happen in Sri Lanka? Do you think your political party still represents that?
As long as we have had a mandate. Now, as Mr. Sumandran says, the mandate of each party and politician will have to be tested de novo in an election again. So when that decision is left to the people, it's up to them to decide. So I can't now say that I carry the wish of the people with me as a whole. I go by the earlier mandate. But now what's happening on the ground has made us all realize that there's a recall of this mandate by the people. So again, we have to go before the people to renew that mandate. So I'm not trying to, claim that I still continue to have the full mandate I had last time. But I had to subject myself again to the test before the people to see whether that mandate could be renewed. So if people say, well, we can't renew the mandate, I had to bow down and then accept that mandate. That is what, as a democratic politician, I have to say.
Yeah, when President Gotabaya Rajapaksa in 2019, when there was COVID-19 raging in Sri Lanka at one particular point, in 2020, he went ahead and held the general elections without any fear or favor, because the party wanted to secure a majority in parliament at the end of the day. So having election now is okay. Is that what you're trying to say?
What I'm saying is, now look at Mr. Gotabaya Rajapaksa's mandate. Now, what was the principal plank of this mandate? He said, I am the only person who can ensure national security, right? Then we were in that perilous situation where Easter Sunday attacks had happened, and he claimed to be the person who can deliver the nation from that fear psychosis, that I am the person who can ensure national security. What did happen finally? He couldn't protect his own house in Mirihan. right? And he had the audacity to send army to defend a sorcerer in Anuradhapura, to defend her house. And this is the president we have today. And he can't enter his own office, as Mr. Sumandaran says. So, see the law and order situation today. So, in such a situation, a person who came and said, I will ensure national security, has he ensured the national security? He can't protect himself. He can't go to his own office. And with what gumption does he claim to be the president today? That is why we are challenging. So, he has to quit. He is responsible for this perilous state of the economy. And what happened as soon as he got elected? On the Article 4 negotiations, the IMF very clearly said the debt was not sustainable, and he went ahead and withdrew all the revenue proposals and then deprived the country of almost 700 billion in revenue. When the IMF said your debt is not sustainable, your revenue is not sufficient to meet your commitments, he goes and slashes the revenue totally. And isn't he responsible for the state we are in?
Mr. Hakim, don't you think that the constitution of our country itself allows for the president to be impeached? We saw in the 90s when the impeachment was to be moved against then President Ranasinghe Premadasa as well. So there are provisions in our constitution that the president may be impeached. So if the opposition gets together, gets the numbers right in parliament, y'all can force the president out of office. Y'all have that ability. Y'all have the mantle at the end of the day. Don't you think so?
Shamir, now look at the equation in parliament. You know, it is very clear that it's a contorted majority that the government is having today. That they have almost 150 members, because last deputy speaker's election, it was very apparent. They got about 148 votes. Right? But still, that deputy speaker within a week resigned and went home, because with such a massive mandate, he couldn't face the nation. He couldn't face the people, because such was the anger against him. So he quit. So this president, he may claim that he has 69 lakhs who voted for him. But the fact is, there has a recall of his mandate that already happened on the streets. And if he doesn't realize it, and if he wants to hang on to power, you see, despite this, you know, he cannot convince the international community of any political stability. So if there is to be political stability, there has to be a new mandate. But we do agree to a certain extent with what Hassan said and what you said. You see, there may be no conducive environment right now for an election. But let us have a timetable.
How long do you think we should persist?
6 months down the road, or even 1 year down the road. But let us have the timetable. Right? So, then we will agree to cooperate with the government to pull us out of this mess together, shouldering all the responsibilities as an all-party government. So what we want is a timetable.
Mr. Ganeshan, do you think, now we've seen a lot of atrocities being committed in Sri Lanka in 2008, 2009. There were groups that were operating in the country. People like Raviraj was murdered in broad daylight. Lasantha Wickrematunge was murdered in broad daylight. We saw a lot of assassinations taking place in high security zones in Sri Lanka at one particular time. And today, there was an incident that was reported in Fort as well. When you look at all this, we appointed a president because we wanted national security to be strengthened. Don't you see a lack in this national security sentiment in the island right now with what is happening very close to us, very close to our homes?
No. You see, Shamir, now this Mr. Gotabaya Rajapaksa is the president now. He was more powerful when he was the defense secretary. He correctly demanded about Raviraj. Raviraj and myself started the campaign against this defense secretary, Gotabaya Rajapaksa, in 2005, when the white vans were roaming in Kalam city, my district, my electorate, picking up our people and there was lots of extrajudicial killings, enforced abductions. That's history. It was more powerful then. So now he's the president now. So this "Gota go home" slogan had been commenced by us then. We said "Gota to go home." Then he was not the president; he was the defense secretary. So now the whole country says so. So there was the war. The way the war was conducted was not acceptable to us. There was indiscriminate killing, indiscriminate aerial bombing, shelling, last stages of the war. Lots of innocent people died. But at the end of the day, the war victory was celebrated by Rajapaksas. That is history, no? So based on that only, the one in 2010, again 2019. Now the same people who voted Rajapaksas, hiding them. People who protest, the protest movement is most of them of the 69 lakhs or 6.9 million people, part of that group. So now we all of us are together. Now we are together as Sri Lankans, working together. We identify as Sri Lankans. We are celebrating the diversity. During the Rajapaksas' high time, it was not so. It was one country, one language, one ethnicity, one religion. We didn't accept it. We waited until this situation. We wanted this country to be accepted as a multi-ethnic, multi-linguistic, multi-religious country. That is what we want. Within which there's a language or religion numerically bigger, larger. There's no issue for us. But 75 is not 100. We need the 25 to begin 100. So now we are Sri Lankans, facing things as Sri Lankans. That's what we say. End of the day, we need a new mandate now. We need a new mandate now. Maybe we may not come back to Parliament. We don't mind it. We may not come. That's up to the people. But the day we wanted has come now. It's coming.
But don't you think, Mr. Ganeshan, that the opposition needs to be at least a little bit more proactive in Parliament? Because we speak about the Commonwealth, the Latimer principles being brought forward. We speak about how the British Parliament works. All these parliaments work on lobbying. The opposition needs to lobby for votes. The opposition needs to get and put their word across to the governing party and make sure that they get their support also for the motions in question. Now, Mr. Mandiran spoke about Rohini Kaviratne's candidature as Deputy Speaker of Parliament. But we are very well aware there was no lobbying that took place in Parliament for Rohini Kaviratne to be appointed as a Deputy Speaker as well. So don't you think the role of the opposition right now is to be more proactive?
No. Shamir, now you see, you heard him saying that. Sudarsini Fernanda Fulle, who is she? She's not a SJP member. But she got up and said no. Said no. That is their duty of lobby. We lobbied.
So when I'm speaking about lobbying,
statement, no.
Yeah, but when I'm saying lobbying, I mean speaking to individuals personally, getting their concurrence, because we saw this is not something new, because we saw even when Andra Bandaranaike was in the ruling party, he crossed over to the UNP from the well of the parliament,
I was there.
and that was all on lobbying. And that time, political parties were able to do so, but we don't see that.
Now we are doing that.
We don't see that. We don't see that. You are saying it's happening, but we don't see practically those being implemented.
Maybe different stages, different way, different manners, but we are doing. That is why these, as Ralph said now, as Sumandiran said now this deputy speaker who won by another 48 votes, he resigned. The pressure is coming from within and outside Parliament to him. with the government side. This government which was voted into the government.
That is Ranjit Sembalapitti. You're
Yes,
actually
yes,
Ranjit
yes,
Sembalapitti.
yes.
But now there is a new deputy speaker that has been appointed by the SLPP.
Yes, fine. Yes, that's fine.
No, but we don't see the lobbying taking place in Parliament, because I don't know whether Mr. Sumandiran would agree, whether there is enough lobbying from the opposition to their causes, to their motions. Does that take place in Parliament now?
It does happen. It does happen. Particularly now, if you
But don't you
give
think
this example
it has
of
to
the
be more-
deputy speaker election,
Yeah.
a lot of lobbying happened. We spoke to those who even abstained from voting and said, no, you must vote. It's true that the people are disgusted that we are spending so much money having elections every session for deputy speaker post. But those who are responsible for that are others. But some refrained from voting. Even with regard to the first election, there was a lot of lobbying, and that is why Imtiaz Bakir Maka's name was proposed at the last minute, because we suddenly saw something that was not scripted previously being played out in Parliament. Now with regard to these protests, one must understand that the protesters are also very keen for their protest to be seen as apolitical. It's not apolitical really, it's all politics, but a party political, shall we say, right? That this is not something that a political party is trying to cash in on. And one of the reasons why this protest has been successful is also because they have kept the political parties out. And we honor that, we respect that. Right? But we must, as parties, at least within the Parliament, give expression to that call of the people, and that we are doing. If you see after this has started, if you see parliamentary proceedings, people are worried, complaining that nothing has happened in Parliament. Nothing is happening in Parliament decisively because of this very different composition that is there. They are holding on to those. That is the reason. But nevertheless, expression by us in Parliament, even bringing that motion of displeasure against the President, is a reflection of what the people are saying outside. By that we even demonstrated that this Parliament is still not the reflection of the people in numbers. So that motion is still there to be brought back again, right? So we are striving to, within the confines of parliamentary rules, the standing orders, etc., give expression to what the country is saying. But those who are in positions of power, are refusing to listen to that.
But don't you think, Mr. Sumandiran, that the Oscar for the year 2022 from Sri Lanka should go to individuals in the caliber of Vimal Veeravansa and Udaya Gammampila and the 41 members of the SLFP and other members
I agree with you entirely.
Who decided to stay neutral in Parliament and then went ahead and supported the cause of the SLPP.
I entirely agree with you, and that's what happened on the day when Ranjit Sembalapitti was, he resigns. Then why did he then stand for election if he resigned? Right? And then after all that money spent on 3/4 of the day Parliament sitting, he resigns yet again. Right? Now, we had suspicion that this was just a drama, and that was proved on that day. They just got out of government. They said they are being independent. We raised it in various meetings in Parliament, saying there is nothing called independent. Our system is that there is an aisle in Parliament. Right? There is an aisle. You either sit on this side or you sit on the other side. When we raised that, then after that only they crossed over and sat on with the opposition. But they voted with the government. Now, one by one, they are slowly getting back in there. So they are playing a drama. And in fact, I told Mr. Wickramasinghe on that first election of the Deputy Speaker, when he campaigned for Ranjit Sembalapitti, I told him they are playing a drama, they are staging a drama. Why are you also going and acting in that drama? No, you stay out of this. If you are an actually opposition member, don't go and join that drama. Right? So that is what has happened now. Another point, if the president asked the leader of the opposition, the main opposition party in parliament, to form a government, he refused. What should he have done next? He should ask the TNA. We are the second largest party in parliament. We have 10 members.
So
Instead of, we have 10 times,
upset
we have 10 times more members. And I'm saying,
But you all upset that the president
no,
asked
no,
your
no,
party.
not at all. I'm just saying the procedure.
Then what is it?
We have 10 times more right to form a government than Mr. Wickramasinghe. Why did he choose Mr. Wickramasinghe? That was, as Mr. Hakim said, was done even before Sajid Premadasa was asked just for.
Because there was talk about
optics.
Ranil Wickramasinghe being the prime minister of the country in
Well
early
before.
April.
Well before.
Yeah.
So all that was, decisions had been made. The very reason that a one-member party is being asked to form a government is 100% proof that the party in government has not changed. It's the same party. How can it be any different? Can one man be the government? No, he can't. Right? So just bring someone, make him sit there, and they just run the show as before. But people are not fooled. People, except some Colombo liberals who think that Mr. Wickramasinghe, merely because he has been 5 times Prime Minister before, can pull a rabbit out of the hat. No, he can't do that. I mean, with all due respect to him, I also think he is the most experienced person, perhaps the most qualified to try to handle this situation in Parliament today. I will grant him that. But not in this Parliament, not with him being a single member of his party, with the rest all sitting behind him, SLPP members.
Mr. Hakim, interestingly, Mr. Subandhiran speaks about pulling a rabbit out of the hat. But I want to focus my attention on who is having the magic wand in their hand right now, because we saw even after the May 9th meetings, May 9th protests, which was a dark day in Sri Lankan history in the recent past. If you go back to 83, 89, those have been also a lot of matters that needs to be addressed even to date, even the 3-decade-long war. But in the recent past, we saw the May 9th protest taking place, and then we see the manner in which Basil Rajapaksa was attending the party leaders' meeting in Parliament. So I'm trying to wonder, who is having the magic wand? Does it really Ranil Wickramasinghe who has the wand to dictate what needs to happen? Or are we still seeing the former finance minister, the Rajapaksa brother, playing a role in the governance structure in Sri Lanka?
No, let me repeat what I said to an Indian channel soon after Mr. Wickramasinghe was appointed, when this question was posed to me. I said the decision to appoint Mr. Wickramasinghe was a puerile decision by a delusional president to protect the Rajapaksas. And I stand by that even today, because that is what everybody feels, and that is what is, because even Mr. Ranil Wickramasinghe's first entry to Parliament itself was delayed for almost a year, and it is widely believed that he came at the behest of the deposed Prime Minister, Mr. Mahinda Rajapaksa, on his advice, so that he can come here and disturb the unity of the Samagi Jana Balavegya, and that was to their advantage, and that is to propel, to going by the story of the chalk circle that Mr. Wickramasinghe related when he took over office. He said he was trying to cross the bridge carrying, like Drusha, the maid, taking the Prince Michael across the...
He's definitely taking the Rajapaksa baby from the bridge very safely.
The Prince Michael was in fact the prince on the Rajapaksa side that he was trying to carry over, and that is what he wanted to achieve. And this is what we all believe he is doing. So he is doing a handsmaid's job on behalf of the Rajapaksas to go by the chalk circle story itself. You see, he quoted the right example to show what predicament he is in. So he is very correct in choosing that example. And that is why we all believe that this is a very, very puerile attempt by the Rajapaksas to have a regrouping using Mr. Wickremesinghe, and that is doomed to fail.
So, when Manusha Nanayakkara and Harin Fernando crossed over to the government, what was the next meeting of the SJB like?
No, the meeting, as far as we are concerned, as you earlier referred to Shamir, it is the certain degree of retraction in the second letter which Mr. Sajith Premadasa had sent to the President was influenced by the fact that he must try and prevent this defection. That was quite apparent, right? So he had come down slightly from his position, right? But then, by then, the original decision, as I told you, plan A was to...
No, my question is very simple. My question is, right after Manusha Nanayakkara and Harin Fernando went and sat in the government benches and took over ministerial post, what was the SJB working committee meeting like the next day?
No, I am not part of the SJB working.
The SJB alliance meeting with Mr. Manu Ganeshan, with you, Rauf Hakim, with Party Champiranmaga, with Raj Senaratna. How was the meeting like? How was the mood like of the meeting that was held subsequently?
None of us were discouraged by the fact those two had defected, because they had defected against the party whip, against the wish of the collective decision of the party, that if the conditions that we had laid before the government is not met, that we are not to take over positions in the government. They defied it and took, saying that somebody has to take this challenge, and this is a very, very precarious situation the country is in. We had to put our shoulder to the wheel. All kinds of spurious reasons have been given.
Will Dr. Harsha De Silva cross over?
No, Harsha didn't cross over.
No, will he cross over?
No, I don't believe he would do so, because he is playing by the party decision, and then he has always stood by that as far as his public pronouncements are concerned. You see, even if his private convictions were otherwise, he has been very open in party discussions. He has said so. There are certain, so we may have to adjust these conditions and then take over responsibility, and those were certain private convictions, but he always maintained his public posture.
Mr. Hakim,
party position.
I think one of the questions, and some of these things we naturally hear through the grapevine, the political grapevine, is the fact that, and it has been said rather openly, that the SJB, and I think even the opposition leader has expressed, will support the good decisions of the government from the opposition, even though they will not commit any members to take on portfolios, contrary to what the Honourable Harin Fernando and Manusha Nanayakkara did do later on. There seems to be a sentiment among a certain part of the voting population, at least, that one of the reasons that this stance continues to be maintained is because the SJB does not want to take on the burden of having to pull through an extremely tough time, because I think anyone with a basic grasp of economics would be able to understand the fact that the next 6 months, year, or even the next 2 years is going to be a very tough time. What do you have to say about this?
No, if you go by the parliamentary equation, it is very, very clear that we will not be able to muster even the simple majority. Together with the TNA and all our parties to put together, the pure opposition has only about 67.
Provided TNA decide to support us.
Provided TNA supports us, I'm saying provided they do support. But then the rest, there are 42 or so-called independent members, of whom some of them have already gone and taken positions. So this kind of equation, it is very difficult. And then in parliamentary politics, we take decisions in the business committee of parliament, right? So when a business committee decision is taken to have a debate or to suspend standing orders and have a debate also, and if the majority of them oppose, they can always call for a vote in the chamber. Then if a government is embarrassed, and if they can't even call for a vote on a very important matter, call for a debate on a very important matter, a government business takes precedence, but it will take precedence only if we have the majority. If we don't have the majority, how are we to conduct affairs in Parliament? So with those kinds of difficulties, it is very, very difficult to expect the STB to go and
take on the responsibility.
But we always said, and we still do so, that we will wait in the opposition and support all the good initiatives by this beleaguered government, beleaguered as it may be, but still it is the government on record. So purposes of the IMF discussions, if this finance minister, who is also the prime minister, if he is going to have a proper economic plan, and if he can convince us of the plan, and if he can put in place proper bodies in Parliament with new powers vested in them, so that the opposition can have a very proactive role to play in this, we can still cooperate. But then it's all up to him.
What I don't understand is, I think when you all said, provided the TNA supports us, I don't know how lightly must we take that, because earlier on TNA MP Sumandiran said that we don't look at things in paper, we have to look at policies, and it has to be something that aligns with the party's objectives. Don't you think you need to explain that to the public a little bit more better? No, because I think the STB may be thinking that the TNA may support the
those
party
discussions also have taken place.
Every given time.
Yeah, I have made it very clear at those meetings that we have a policy of not joining the executive until the Tamil national question is resolved. But given the extreme nature of the economic crisis that we face right now, we were even willing to reconsider that for purpose of supporting a government. Not that we have to cross over to the government benches and take executive positions, but support a government from the opposition benches, which we did in 2015. Why did we do that in 2015? Because there was a constitutional assembly formed and a new constitution was being negotiated, and we wanted to participate in that with the aim of resolving the national question once and for all. So we participated, we contributed.
You all didn't play the role of the opposition in 2015? Sorry? You all didn't play the role of the opposition?
No, we sat in the opposition. That's what I'm saying. We sat in the opposition.
No, because
but we supported the government. No, we supported the government because there was a constitutional assembly formed, and the new constitution was going to be.
But that
is our people's primary concern.
But Mr. Sumandiran, that is what exactly the Mahinda Rajapaksa administration was saying at that time, that the TNA was in support of Maithripala Sirisena and Ranil Wickremesinghe and not looking at the causes of the opposition. And now you're seconding it, saying that you all were having some sort of an agreement
so that
to work together collectively.
Of course, that was quite plain. Because why our people's main concern since independence is that there is a Tamil national question that has not been resolved. Why did this country go through over 25 years of bloody war? Why did that happen? I mean, it didn't happen just for nothing, just for kicks. It happened for a serious reason. Those issues have still not been resolved. So our primary concern is to resolve that.
From 2015 to 2019, nothing was resolved either, apart from from 2015 to 2019,
exactly.
Nothing was resolved.
So 2015 to 2019, there was an effort to resolve that. A constitutional assembly was formed. 3 of us were members of a steering committee. A draft constitution was actually placed in Parliament on the 16th of January 2019. Right? Until the cohabitation between the President and the Prime Minister broke down, we worked together to achieve that. Still, we did not take executive position.
Did you all do the role of the opposition at that time from 2015 to
Mr. Sambandan was the leader of the opposition. We played the role of the opposition as well as cooperated with resolving the biggest issue that the country faced. Even today, country might be facing this economic crisis, unprecedented and all of that. But the national question is still not resolved.
But there was conflict of interest there. No?
There was no conflict of interest. Why would there be any conflict of interest? In order to resolve a national issue, on account of which more than 100,000 citizens had died.
No,
The
there is no
government and opposition must work together to resolve it.
There is no question about resolving a problem with regard to the minorities that have faced.
No, I'm not saying minorities question.
No.
I'm saying a national question.
National question.
We don't regard ourselves as minorities.
Absolutely.
Right.
That have had dire consequences.
Now people are saying, why don't you all get together? There's a serious economic crisis. Have an all-party government. I'm saying similar issue. Resolve the Tamil national question was a serious issue.
Yeah, but
so we have to work together.
But when you're in the opposition, the checks and balances should
of course,
come
that
from
we
the
maintain.
opposition.
We did not support everything that the government did.
Had to deal with the opposition.
No, we did not support everything that the government did. We didn't support everything that the government did.
You said that earlier.
We didn't support everything that the government did. Yeah. But we supported that government in order to achieve that objective, which is primarily the aspiration of our people. Even today, our people are saying, in some areas, people are raising the question, why are you getting involved in this? This is a single nation's problem. Our issues have not been resolved. Why are you getting involved in this?
No, I don't think
people are saying, no, not the majority. Not the majority, but there's a sizable number of our people are saying that. Why aren't there protests in the north and the east on this issue? There are no spontaneous protests.
But there were protests
we have to go and do
well.
token protests. We have to lead the protests.
Yeah, that has happened.
No. Yeah. That is politicians. We have to advise our people that we must stand in solidarity with what's happening and lead that protest, which is not happening here. Politicians can't lead the protest here. Right. But there we had to educate our people in order to stand in solidarity with this protest. But spontaneously, they don't come out because they are saying, we face this. What is this economic crisis? Right? 20 days you don't have petrol, you have blocked the roads. 20 years we didn't have a drop of petrol. 20 years we didn't have a drop of diesel. 20 years we didn't have electricity at all. Right? We went through that. Nobody cared in this country. No one else cared about that. Now when we say it, people are saying, is that so? You all didn't have electricity for 20 years. Is that one country then? That others did not even know what happened to our people all those years? No, so they have a legitimate grievance to voice, say, why should we be bothered? But that's not our position. We advise our people that may have been so, but now, right, we have to stand in solidarity with these people. Because I tell you, there is a change.
The very
place in which, as my colleague said, war victory was celebrated. Few days ago, they did not celebrate the war victory. They celebrated Mullivaikal massacre.
No, I agree with all what you said.
So there's a change.
I think the people who are watching the show tonight may agree or may disagree with what you're saying, Mr. Mandiri. But at the end of the day, that was not my question. My question was, when you all were in the position of leader of the opposition, when your party was having it, the opposition at that time, the SLPP or the Mahinda Rajapaksa clan at that time said that you all were acting on the behest of the Ranil Wickremesinghe and Maithripala Sirisena administration. And in one of your remarks, you said that you all have been working together collectively.
Collectively, in order to formulate a new constitution for the country.
That you all have not acted based on the...
not on every issue, but in order to achieve an important milestone that this country must pass.
Right.
Without that, even if you come through this economic crisis, the country will not prosper.
So, Mr. Ganeshan, tell us, what is the plan that the SJB has in play economically to revive the country? Because everyone is opposing it. We understand that many political parties as the TNA, the JVP and the SJB has vociferously told that there needs to be an alternative. We saw Mr. Hakim saying that the president should go. We heard Mr. Sumandiran saying the president should go. I believe that's the same sentiment expressed by you as well. The president should go. What is the alternative that we have to play with?
Stability. Let's bring back stability. That is what is needed here.
How? How so?
Yeah, obviously. That is through another new election. Bring a mandate, new mandate. There is no other way. There are issues right now which prevent us from going to elections immediately. there are livelihood issues. They take care of it. Look now, Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe is the Prime Minister here. We are not pulling his legs now. We are not pulling his legs now. We are not doing politics right now with him. We allow him to go ahead. But yet we understand, as I said, yet we understand that we need to have stability in this country. Unless and until we have stability, bring back stability in this country, give confidence to our people in Sri Lanka and elsewhere, bring FDIs.
When you say bringing FDIs, don't you think Ranil Wickremesinghe can play a role in bringing the FDIs necessary for the country? Because now, as one of you all mentioned before, 5 times Prime Minister, has international affiliations. Right after Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe took courts, several minutes later, who tweeted? The US Ambassador to Sri Lanka. Then several hours later, the Japanese ambassador went and met.
When there's a new government comes in,
yeah,
and when a new Prime Minister takes into office, is a formal activity in the international arena. So that you can't take it so seriously. Right now, I just said now. I told you. He has spoken to the Prime Minister. Yeah. So that is all happens. When the Prime Minister, no, it happens. It doesn't mean that they are going to give him dollars and sterling pounds tomorrow. It's not so.
Mr. Ganesan, but just to go back to something that Shamir asked you earlier, the question I think was on what the SJB's plan is in terms of helping the economy recover and really getting it back on track. And you said naturally stability and an election is the way to go. How does an election guarantee stability, Mr. Ganesan? Because full disclosure, I used to have some sort of role at the Foreign Office in a previous life, and something we found is that when it comes to basic metrics, even during the tenure of the Yahapalana government, where on the ease of doing business index we were very far down, and it comes to the corruption index, we are extremely highly ranked. And also in a number of metrics of that nature that actually encourage investment, we are not anywhere close. Now to add to that, we have a foreign exchange crisis, we have a governance crisis, we have social unrest. Where is the guarantee, and also what is the policy to guarantee that we can recover?
This new SJB government, which we are planning to form, it's not going to be another duplicate of Yahapal. Got it? Now, we SJB, not UNP.
Right.
SJB.
Quick question.
Yes.
Tomorrow, you have an election. Day after tomorrow, the SJB takes in office and all of the ministers are appointed. By day after tomorrow, what are the first 5 things you will do to ensure the economy?
Wait a bit. Now, why did this the Rajapaksa regime failed economically?
Because they took a number of wrong policy decisions.
Let me see. One is corruption. One is wrong management. One is wastage. Got it?
Yeah.
These are 3 reasons for this Rajapaksa government to fail in economically. Forget about the other things economically. So we will not do those 3. We'll be very careful about those 3. There are economic managers in our team.
Absolutely, but you're mentioning the things they did wrong.
Yeah.
But now we are scraping the bottom of the barrel.
Yes.
You as a minister, you've held cabinet portfolios before. What would you say would be the 3 steps that an SJB government that you would be part of immediately would take in order to try to reboot the economy?
Yeah, well, as I said, because of the stability, will be the confidence of the international community, world community.
How long do you think it will take for us to be able to access the international financial market?
That was everybody's guess. But we are confident once we form the government of Sri Lanka. So we have our traditional friends here, and we'll work with them. They will help us. And also, as I said earlier, now Sri Lankan revenue, the number 1 income comes from the expatriates,
right,
who work in the Middle East and elsewhere.
Right.
That is in 2019 it was like 8.5 billion. Next is tourism. Then is export. Now right now also the export revenues are not all the revenues are coming to Sri Lanka. Part of the export revenue is parked elsewhere.
But that has continued to happen throughout the years.
Yes, it happens because they have lost confidence in Sri Lankan government. and the Sri Lankan expatriates not sending their money back to Sri Lanka through the official means, through banks. You understand that? I don't explain that. Then tourism is gone. So these are no. Forget about the foreign support, international support. These are the national income revenues.
So usually, thing is.
So this stability will repair these damages which has occurred to these expatriates revenue, tourism, as well as the export earnings.
Right. Mr. Hakim, now you all are calling for an election immediately and or in a particular time frame. In 6 to 7 months, hold an election, make sure that the public's mandate is checked. Have you ever discussed about a common candidate who would be fielded at the next election, or is it going to be Sajid Premadasa? Because there are a lot of names in the SJB right now. There's names like Sarath Fonseca's name is being discussed about, then Sajid Premadasa's name is being discussed, then Partha Ranamaka's name is being discussed. Have you all discussed about a common candidate for the next election, or you all have not discussed about it yet?
Shamir, when you talk about the next election, we are talking not of a presidential election. You see, we are only talking presently about, if at all the president resigns, then the parliament only had to elect the next president. And that, of course, anybody who has the confidence of the parliament.
But you all have to be confident to go for an election, presidential election, right? Isn't it?
No. If it is,
we are talking about
the entire country is going to vote. Now the parliament is going to vote, right? Now what we are looking for, election, what we are calling is to bring some stability in parliament, the numbers in parliament. That has to be corrected by way of a fresh mandate for parliament from a parliamentary election.
So who would be
in a parliamentary election, of course, the party leaders, whoever who is able to command the majority in parliament will get elected as prime minister. You see, and that we confidently believe our side will have the numbers, probably with the support of other parties like the TNA.
Every political party, Mr. Hakim, has the confidence of garnering the majority of the votes in the next parliament election. So that's the usual norm. I don't want to talk about the usual norm. I'm just asking you, who is going to be a prime ministerial candidate if that's the case?
No, I mean, we are in a coalition and we have pledged our loyalty to Mr. Sajid Premadasa as the leader of the Samagi Jana Balawegaya, of which we are all members. So, I mean, our position has not changed there, unless the Samagi Jana Balawegaya itself decides to change its leader. So then we will have to look at somebody else. But as long as Mr. Sajid Premadasa remains the leader of the SJB and we remain partners of the SJB, we will support that party's leadership to form the government. That is our position. Now, be that as it may, Shamir, may I just come back to this position? The previous panelist posed this question to Mano about our economy policies. You know, we have to restructure our economy. And I mean, when we say 6 months or 10 months down the road we want to have an election, no, all of us are not going to be folding our hands and watching this government trying to repair the economy. We are prepared to support, and what we feel is even our policies when it comes to economic restructuring, we have laid it out. The SJB, our economic team led by Kabir Hashim and Eran Vikramaratna and Harsha De Silva has very clearly laid out what we are out to do. We have clearly said so. In fact, the leaders of the business community, most of them came and met all of us, and they also want us to discuss this issue with the government, come up with a proper economic plan. We have already placed that before the nation. What our economic plan is, restructuring the economy, trying to, we have state-owned enterprises which bleed in this country's revenue, because we are, the treasury is supporting most of the state-owned enterprises. This has to come to an end. We have to try to restructure them. We have to also have proper pricing of all the essentials, because now see the amount of losses that have been run up by the Petroleum Corporation. Sri Lankan Airlines, for instance, have to be obviously privatized. So variety of other, we are having almost 519 state-owned enterprises. Governments must get out from doing business by themselves.
Yeah, but what I don't understand is when Ranil Wickremesinghe had the opportunity to do all this between 2015 and 2019, why is he trying to tell the public of this nation as it's something new? Because we've been knowing that Sri Lankan Airlines have been making losses since 2008. That's not new, that's not news. We know that state-owned enterprises in Sri Lanka like the CPC, the Water Board, the Sri Lanka Electricity Board are making losses. That's not something new. We know that right now there is no money to even give away the public servants of this country, and money needs to be printed. We know it's not new. So why wasn't Ranil Wickremesinghe as the Prime Minister arrest all these issues between 2015 and 2019, and why is he speaking about all the issues now? That's my question.
No, but our economic policies, even under Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe, was relatively sound compared to the current administration's attitude. Now, for instance, look at we decided to float the rupee against the dollar, right? And then we maintained a stable foreign currency position. Though the rupee depreciated, it at least settled down at some point. Now what has happened? Now we are now going on a managed floating policy, right? Which may have to be given up. We are trying to still control this thing. And the last government wasted almost $2.5 billion trying to defend the rupee, right? By keeping a very fixed rate foreign exchange at 202 rupees, we lost our own expatriates sending money. Almost they used to send about 700 million for a month. It has come down to almost $250 million today. Yeah. Right? Because they don't themselves have the confidence. So we are now drying up our coffers. We are forcibly spending our reserves on defending the rupee. Yeah. And we have caused this serious problem. Even our own exporters are not bringing in their proceeds. And this is what is happening.
No, but the exporters can't do that. They have to
they
bring,
can't. They can't, but there are so many devious ways in which monies could be withheld.
Yeah, because that's illegal. If they send something from Sri Lanka, if it's recalled at customs, that money needs to come through the right channels to Sri Lanka, Mr. Hakim. Anyway, I want to...
It should come. It should come. It should come, but it is not coming.
Yeah, but you can't do that.
You can't do that. You can't do that.
If any exporter in Sri Lanka is doing that, that's wrong and illegal.
No. But I say we don't approve it.
Yeah.
It is illegal, but it is happening.
Right. Anyway,
must understand that.
So, Mr. Sumandaran, you have a question from one of our ardent viewers of Face the Nation. Why did the Justice Minister discuss the 21st Amendment with the Mahanayakas? Is the Buddhist clergy, and any clergy for that matter, still going to be a part of matters of political interest going forward in Sri Lanka?
I too have that same question. I would like to ask the Minister of Justice that question, why he went and discussed it with the Mahanayakas. But I also don't think that that was appropriate at this stage. If he wanted to discuss with religious leaders, then there should have been a conference of religious leaders from all religions and discussed it. I mean, there is nothing wrong in discussing with the religious leaders or any other segment of society. He should discuss it with the trade unions. He should discuss it with the housewives. I mean, everybody. So in that list, he can also discuss it with the religious leaders.
Yeah, because clergy is being identified across the world as individuals who have given up everything, who does not want to embrace anything.
No, I don't want to comment on the precepts of who a Buddhist clergy is, because different religions have different precepts. And another religious clergy will have a different ways of dealing with the situation. So that comparison I don't want to comment upon, but I'm merely saying the whole country can be consulted with regard to this, but the most important point about Dr. Vijayadasa Rajapaksa's proposal is that the country is being told that we are bringing back the 19th Amendment, repealing the 20th Amendment. But that's a lie. Right? That's a lie from the perspective of executive presidency. The 19th Amendment itself was brought forward in 2015 as an interim first step to the abolition in toto of the executive presidency. And I have explained this many times. It was diluted 3 times and it became a hodgepodge. It doesn't really reflect as a first step towards abolition, and eventually, since the new constitution never materialized, that did not happen. Now, for some reason, because of the 20th Amendment, and that needs to be got rid of, they are talking about going back to the 19th Amendment as a first step again. President said it in his last address to the nation. 2 days ago, Prime Minister said, another matter is that the executive presidency must be abolished. He says that very clearly. Right? But first let us do this. Now, what is he trying to do? He is trying to further strengthen executive presidency. Under the 19th Amendment, the president couldn't hold any ministerial portfolio. Now he can, any number of ministerial portfolio. So this is very different to the 19th Amendment. That is the first issue. The second is Honorable Rajit Madhuva Bandara's bill, which abolishes executive presidency in toto, has gone up to the Supreme Court. In 2 weeks' time, we will have the determination of the Supreme Court. If the Prime Minister's office gives a report, it can be taken up for debate and passed. And if the Supreme Court determines that you require a referendum, you can hold a referendum within 2 months. And if necessary, as we have all said, Parliament needs a fresh mandate, hold both the referendum and the parliamentary election on the same day. The voter needs to go into the polling booth only once. The whole structure will change. You will definitely need a fresh mandate for a parliament in a time when the president does not have executive powers. Right? So all that can be done. So when all that can be done within the space of 1 to 2 months from today, why is he talking about an intermediate step, which is really not an intermediate step? That has not even been gazetted as yet.
But now
that will take longer than Ranjit Madhuva Bandara's bill being passed.
No, but Sri Lanka Freedom Party has said that they are in, or they will support the 21st Amendment to the Constitution.
Sri Lanka Freedom Party doesn't know whether they are sitting or standing or walking. Right? They are in all sorts of trouble. Half their members are sitting as ministers. They are the ones who said we are now independent, not knowing that if you leave the government, you must cross over. Then after we would nudge them, they crossed over. Then they vote with the government. They are saying they will take disciplinary action against their party members. Mahinda Amaravira says, no, with the party's knowledge, we took executive office. So they are in 6s and 7s. I won't take Sri Lanka Freedom Party's pronouncements today with any seriousness.
Mr. Sumandiran, just to elaborate or touch upon something you mentioned, which is a proposal to have the referendum and the general election at the same time, so you can have people avoiding going to the polling booth.
Yeah.
I think one of the key contentions, even the Prime Minister has been raising, is the environment for an election, and you addressed that earlier. Now, there is a big talk also of a potential food crisis on the cards. At the end of this credit line, we essentially have no money to import oil. Printing paper is more expensive than ever before. And like you mentioned, we can take a grant to hold an election. But I think if you've seen over the media, I think even a key member of the SJB, Patali Champika Ranawaka, has also said that it may not be an opportune time to hold an election. Do you think, while it is the most realistic solution to solving the crisis, the political crisis at hand, that it is a feasible option on the ground to do both these things at the same time and to have it within 2 months?
Yeah, I think it can be done, but there needs to be consensus on that issue. So as Honorable Hakim said, there is a space, right? There must be a commitment to doing that. Then an all-party government is also a possibility. Right? Then there is greater possibility of everybody pulling together as one, because we can see the end date, right? When the people's new wish or new mandate can be given effect. So that is what the Bar Association also said. That is what SJB's letter says, right? Give a time frame. So when people say Gota go home, it's not only just that individual. You see, they want the executive office also ousted in this process. That's very clear. So we have come to that point. We need to give it effect earlier than later. But I understand there can be such a situation right now. I mean, if you have fuel queues, right, you just can't have the election on that kind of day. But you have a space, you have a buffer of about 6 months. A referendum needs to be held within 6 months of that bill passing. So you have about 6 months. Right? Within that time, we must all get together, find the money, right, through a grant or whatever, ease the situation, and have it. Because if you don't, the reason is this: if you don't have that change and bring about political stability, it's going to get far worse economically. So you have to grit your teeth somehow and do this in
Mr.
order
Hakim,
that we recover from the economic mess.
Mr. Hakim, very interesting thoughts by Mr. Sumandiran, saying that if the bill is passed, there is a 6 months window, you can hold a referendum accordingly. Even to pass a bill, Mr. Hakim, there needs to be a majority in parliament, no? Without that, you all couldn't even get the simple deputy speaker post approved in parliament. There was no majority. In a situation like that, in the current parliament context, how can you expect a simple bill to be passed based on the will and fancy of the opposition?
Before Mr. Hakim responds to that, since I said that...
No, I'll come back to
I'll just say that. I'll say something on that. You see, the president must, in this context, the president must say, all right, I will leave that decision to the people. Let the people decide whether they want to continue with the executive presidential system or not. That's what he must do. At least that is what he must do. He must resign, of course, but at least this.
So let me pick Mr. Hakim's brain on this as well. Yes.
Yeah. Now you see
you all can't get a simple deputy speaker's post approved in parliament.
No. Similarly, you see, in order to have an election, we must have a parliamentary majority, right? So we have to convince the majority. Now, why is this dilemma? The majority in today's parliament are not confident about their own political future. It is all a parochial decision to protect their current office. They don't want to go out of office. They know if they go and face the hustings tomorrow, that they are going to be voted out. So they are only reacting to their own personal whim and fancy of protecting their office. And this is why they are now deliberately protracting and moving away from holding an election in time. I mean, why did they, in the last election after the president was elected, Mr. Maithripala Sirisena, when he defected from the SLP and won with the overwhelming support of the main opposition, the United National Party, as it was then, the Tamil National Alliance, Muslim Congress, and Tamil TPA, and all others, right? What happened? You see, the current lot in the SLP, most of them defected from their then leader and joined Mr. Maithripala Sirisena to save their skin. And then what did they do? They tried to tinker with the constitutional amendments. And then our efforts to abolish the executive presidency was made into a hodgepodge, as Mr. Sumandiran says. So the 19th Amendment had its 3 different incarnations. There were 3 different positions from which we had to come down, and finally what we intended was, it was a lame duck constitution which came in as a 19th Amendment, but at least that was some advancement, this thing, and we must appreciate Mr. Maithripala Sirisena came and presented it and also promised that he is the first president who is foregoing his own powers and all that plaudits he took, but he did away with all those promises when he finally appointed Mr. Mahinda Rajapaksa against his own constitution and violated the constitution, and then brought in that 52-day government, right? All of it, all this drama, these SLFPs were involved. Right?
Right,
Because they were part of our government. They went and took again ministries in the so-called 52-day government, and subsequently when this president came, also they were ministers. You see, I mean, this lot have now realized that they are going to face the guillotine when it comes to the election. So they are all against any elections being held.
The package shuffle time and time, but the jokers, of course, remain
The same. Yeah. So now the problem is, you see, why do you run away from this reality on the ground, that your mandate have already been recalled by the people on the streets? They are calling for your blood, and can you imagine? I mean, none of us condone the violence that happened on the 9th of this month. Right? None of us condone it, but then the level to which this anger of the people have gone was demonstrated in almost 52 houses of sitting members of parliament being
Mr.
burned.
Hakim, if you may,
This is an unprecedented event.
A quick question now, Mr. Hakim. Now, today, because there is no government representatives, we have to be the devil's advocate and
Please do.
And pose questions to you with
appropriately
regard to how the
identified
government
yourself.
would look at it. Unfortunately,
You appropriately identified yourself as a devil's advocate.
You are doing a poor job of a devil's advocate.
we need to maintain the balance as much as possible. So, in the government's defense, let me put it that way. In the government's defense, the government could say, what we are seeing right now in Gaulface, what we are seeing in pocket sporadic protests across Sri Lanka, is not the will of the 22 million people in the country, let alone 12 million people who are the eligible voters in Sri Lanka. What do you have to say to that argument?
That's why you need an election.
Look at the positive side of what is happening among the protesters. You see, this whole
mandate has already been given to this incumbent government. There is no question about that. Under the Constitution, 2020, there was a general election held, and they can remain in power for 5 years. And if the president decides after a certain amount of time frame, based on the Constitution, to dissolve Parliament, that is also on the cards. But does it really reflect the will of the people? The protest march that we are seeing at Gaulface Green, the protest march that we are seeing in the north and east, as Mrs. Mandiran mentioned before, does that reflect the will of the 22 million people of Sri Lanka?
No, going by the general vibes in the civil society, there is widespread support for the protests. I mean, I don't see any dissenting voice decrying their protest. They are in full agreement, full support. And let us all admit that all our children are also going and joining them. And that is what is happening. You see, I mean, they don't care for their own parents or their admonitions. You see, they feel that it is their future at stake and that all the politicians have failed them. So, I mean, this is the feeling on the ground. So, if the politicians are not going to take stock of the situation and at least provide the answers to them and look at their aspirations and address them. If you look at the social media, it is very, very apparent. And today, I mean, let me say this with quite a lot of responsibility, that all of us politicians are hated. And that is on the ground, it is a feeling.
Right. I need to pick that point which you raised and raise it from Mr. Manu Ganeshan. Now, we have been, throughout this show, we have been highlighting one particular slogan of the protesters, that is "Gota, go home." And we keep, even all three of you keep insisting that, based on this demand, the president should resign because he has failed. But at the same time, these same protesters are saying that they reject the political system in the country. They don't want all these politicians who are in parliament. We seem to be ignoring that. Now, when you say that the Samagijana Balawegya proposes that, we should go in for an election in 6 months. You say that with confidence that because you all want to come into power. But that is not what the people want. I have never seen a protester, holding a slogan saying the SJB must be the next government. That's what we want, isn't it?
Yes, I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised. Because now the protest movement is, they say it is non-party. It is, no party has too much influence in that movement. And there are, that is one version. Other version is there are some certain other parties which are part of the protest movement, but they are non-party activists also part of the movement. So we can't call it a party. So therefore they can say that. We are not surprised about it. There is no issue over it. And then I heard Shamir bringing a question to Mr. Rauf Hakim about the current government's idea about the people's will today. Which government do you mean? Government of Mahinda Rajapaksa or government of Ranil Wickremesinghe? Even the current government's mandate from the 6 lakhs, the 6.9 million people, has been twisted right now, no? Because the now current Prime Minister is not part of the SLBP. He is not. His vote bank is not part of that 6.9 million. So it is all twisted.
Mr. Ganesan, now.
That is one of the reason. That is another reason, very reason why we need a new mandate.
Right.
Everything is twisted now.
Right. You say that we need a new mandate.
Yeah.
That is because you believe that your party or your faction would come into power once again.
Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, we believe, yes. We're confident.
Okay. Now you were a minister in the previous government, right? That was under Maithripala Sirisena and Ranil Wickremesinghe. One of the main accusations that was leveled against your government at that time was the central bank bond scam.
Yes.
Right? We all remember that, and we saw how billions were looted.
Yes.
Let's say now it exceeded 15 billion as far as I remember from one particular bond scam. Whereas now this government, I think we are playing the devil's advocate once again here, where things like the sugar scam, we saw 5 billion being looted, which is much less than what happened.
15 billion.
Yeah, much less than the central bank bond scam.
No, it's more.
No, it's
15.9 billion.
It's more.
15.9 billion.
Yeah,
according to the Treasury report.
Right. If such scams have taken
anyway,
place,
we don't have to argue about the numbers, amounts. I mean, let's forget about it.
Right. Okay.
Scams,
Yes, understandable.
Yeah.
So if such scams have taken place even under your government, the previous government, why should the people vote for you?
No. It is not so. It is not so, because in our previous government, there were 3 groups. One is headed by the Prime Minister, Ranil Wickremesinghe. Other was headed by the President Maithripala Sirisena. There was a 3rd group. That group mostly represents SJB right now. Is it clear to you? Yes.
But it's the same pack of jokers being shuffled all over again.
No, it's not so. It is not so. I'm not a joker. Maybe there are any jokers here. Don't say that. We are not jokers.
Mr. Sumandiran, if I can just pick your brain, I think, so particularly a lot of the angst comes from a lot of young people from my generation, people from Hassan's generation, and a few people from Shamir's generation also.
Thanks.
But see,
not so young.
But see, in the midst of seeking change, I think everyone wants things to happen very rapidly. Everyone wants the economy to bounce back. Everyone wants political reform, things like that. I think I saw a popular celebrity saying, if the banking system doesn't correct itself, let's not pay our loans so that they will correct itself. Want instant gratification. How important is it that if we want to set the foundation for a Sri Lanka that we desire, that as difficult as it is, that we pay respect to the due processes and follow the right legal way of doing things? How important is it?
Yeah, very good question. I was thinking about that before you even asked that question. You see, when emergency was declared, my colleague Shanakian Rasamanikam and I went and met the speaker and told him that he must convene parliament because there was a 10-day gap and parliament must be convened. When we came out, the press was there and we spoke to the press. That day we appealed to the young people and to the protesters and said,
you must bring in changes. We agree with you that a big system change is necessary. But that must be done through the institutions that are already there. Right? Because if you don't do that, we said it in the context of Parliament being blocked and so on. We said we can understand your frustration that we are unable to do it in Parliament and so on. But we are moving things slightly, slowly. Don't do this outside of the institutions, because when you do it outside the institutions, there can be bloodbath. Right? You might have romantic notions of a revolution and so on, but that's going to cost lives. And therefore we made that appeal, and that's my answer to you. It's extremely important to do this within these institutions. Now let's come to the elections. The question was, how does an election change the system? Elections, people vote, right? So you tell these protesters, give them ample time, tell them go campaign in the country for a system change. You stand for election, right? Or you back candidates who will support the system change. Make the Parliament a representation of those who want the system change, right? This is the time for that. And in the new Parliament, bring about the system change.
Asuma was correct, because they can organize themselves into a political party.
They can contest.
They can contest.
I mean, they have the support of the whole country today, right? So either they can contest or they can find people who will back them, and I believe if you have an election now, there will be a huge difference in the composition of Parliament, not just these traditional parties. I mean, I don't know whether I will stand for election, right? I'll have to decide that. Or even if I do stand, what I would stand for might be very different. Because, this is a very positive thing that has happened in this country. Because all of these protesters are asking for the right thing. I haven't heard anything wrong that they have said so far. Right? And some things that we have not been able to do for so long in this country, they have been able to do. In fact, one or two groups came and met me, and they said we must do it outside the Parliament. And I was trying to, reason with them and say, no, that's dangerous, do it. They said, but, do you understand that any change that has happened today has happened only because of what happened outside Parliament? I had to concede, yes. I had to say, yes, you are right. But we have to channel it in some way so that there is no anarchy.
Absolutely. I think another question similar to the legal side of things that I think Mr. Sumandiran answered very well. Mr. Hakim, I think you have held a number of portfolios over the years, some of strategic importance as well. Again, similar question, but slightly different subject area. There's a lot of people who I speak to on a daily basis, people who are part of my everyday life, my friends, my family, my colleagues, who are sometimes of the belief that there's a quick fix to the problems that we have at hand. But I think you know more than anybody else that there are certain systemic issues, and that even coming out of this particular economic rut, we can come out with a temporary solution for a few months, but we'll go back into it. How important is it that we take advantage of this opportunity, or at least we can look at it as an opportunity, to try and reset or reframe the way we look at things, so that we can structurally alter the way this country is run, the economy is run, for actually a sustainable model? Because if not, what's going to end up happening is we're going to fall into this rut again in 5 years or 10 years.
No, you are very correct. You see, now those people protesting outside is only looking at the political establishment. There is something called the bureaucracy in this country. That also has got to be more efficient and restructured. And their independence have got to be ensured, and their efficiency and transparency in decision making too has to be questioned. You see, and while that happens, what about the business community? They have to also follow certain ethical standards. You see, when you talk about corruption in this country, corruption is not one-way street. it is a two-way street. You see, even the so-called business community is culpable. So you have to have, you know, proper procurement standards, right? There, of course, in this new amendment, we are proposing a procurement commission. We are proposing various other commissions. You see, so there has to be the system change means just not the political establishment alone, the bureaucracy, the entire business culture in the country has got to change. I mean, this also, I mean, calls into question even this issue of what you mentioned about ease of doing business index, right? We are sliding from the index for several notches, right? So we have to bring it up. If we have to bring it up, we have got to create that confidence. Then what about the law and order machinery? You see, law and order machinery is also corrupt and inefficient, right? And that has happened. Why? Because of the prolonged emergency periods that this country has had. Because we have given them a license to do whatever they want under the emergency, right? They have got used to this, and this has become an endemic problem for law enforcement today, because they are not efficient, because their efficiency has been compromised, because you have given them some easy way out. You see, you can just bury bodies without even autopsies under emergency. So because of that, the investigative capacity of our agencies have got totally destroyed. So all of this has to be changed. So this is a you know, problem that we have had for the last 30-40 years. Right?
Mr.
Our
Hakim,
civil
now,
service is not at the level that it was earlier. Now our you know, Sinhala only policy has today you know, totally destroyed this country's future. But new generation is now thinking anew, and main thing is polarization between communities. Now the biggest achievement by the protesters outside today, they have now called to account the government and their policies regarding racism, right? And that has come to an end, to at least in Golface and those places, right? Not so in Parliament. So all of us have to realize this and change ourselves. Otherwise, the country has no future. That is the system change we should bring in.
So, Mr. Hakim, interestingly, all three of you speak about having a new breed of parliamentarians in the parliament as well. Ms. Sumandiran spoke about how important to get the individuals who are protesting outside Golface maybe to form their own political party and then contest at a future election. But I want to take your attention back to the 9th of May incidents that took place in Sri Lanka. The violence that took place, because violence cannot be condoned at any cost. Burning houses, we've seen that era in Sri Lanka in 83, the Black July time. So we don't want to slide back to that time. So when things of this sort is taking place in the country at present, do you think individuals, intellectuals, smart people would want to contest an election in Sri Lanka? Would we be able to attract good politicians to the next parliament whenever there is an election?
No, but the thing is, if they don't want to come through established parties because of the baggage that each party carries for various reasons, if they are not convinced by that, they can form their own political movements. Now look at this particular movement called Aam Aadmi Party in India.
In India.
In Delhi, they came out of this Anna Hazare's movement and suddenly you know, brought together various intellectuals into a political formation, and they captured power in the in Delhi first, and now it has extended to Punjab. It was the biggest surprise, right? And they are now going to take it to other states. So I mean, this is a new political movement that has come out of the blues. You see, the traditional parties are losing its vibrancy because of such formations.
You speak about India, but let's look at Pakistan for that matter. Imran Khan was not a career politician, was a cricketer, formed his own political party years after he became the Prime Minister of Pakistan. What happened to him? Look at President Gotabaya Rajapaksa, Defense Secretary, good administrator, took over the country. Look what happened to Sri Lanka.
You know, suddenly I mean, I am not trying to compare Gotabaya Rajapaksa to Imran Khan. I mean, there are two different individuals. Both may have, one may. You see, the issue is, you see, now there are certain geopolitical factors that also comes into play. I mean, those are very contentious areas. Let me not go into that. But the issue today, as far as Sri Lanka is concerned, there is a fledgling movement of a so-called youth antagonism against all in the political establishment. I mean, this is, I mean, I'm talking generally of everybody, right? Some, in degree, the anger against some may be more, some may be less, but then they want a total change, and that change is, whether we like it or not, is taking place out there. And when you look at the social media, it's very, very apparent to all of us. So the way in which we are going to do politics has come to a new juncture. So it's a paradigm shift from the conventional way of doing politics.
So, Mr. Mandan, now this government came into power, it's very clear, after the 21st April attacks, and bringing forth the anti-national rhetoric about having an autocratic leader to govern the country. We see similar sentiments now being expressed by various political parties in Sri Lanka as well to gain some mileage in the longer run. Do you think political parties of this nature will have a place in Sri Lankan politics in the future?
That is to be tested. So now that there is a movement in the right direction, I think this is the right moment to give them an opportunity to be heard by the country, and I'm sure we will all support that. This new trend, as I said earlier, is all positive, and we will all support that. The others who still want to hang on to racist politics, corrupt politics, violent politics, we hope will be swept aside with this new energy that we are seeing in the country.
Before I go for a short commercial break, do you think the Rajapaksa family, the family dynasty, will have any political bearing in the future in Sri Lanka? Because we saw in Philippines, things have changed. We saw even in the case of the Indian Premier Narendra Modi, a lot of anti-Muslim sentiments were expressed in the early 2000-2001 in Gujarat, and as a result of that, there were a lot of Muslims who were killed. And several years after, there you go, he's heading the BJP and the Prime Minister of India. Philippines, as an example, can be taken. Recent elections, the new Premier very clearly saying that he won't follow in the footsteps of his father, who had nearly 11,000 pair of shoes from the public money, for an example. So do you think the political dynasty of the Rajapaksas has come to a complete stall now in Sri Lanka?
I would like to think so, but as you have also cited other examples, it's not a given. No, it's a constant battle. The price of liberty is eternal vigilance. So those who have now come out and shown their civic consciousness and are willing to, give so much for it, must continue to be those, vigilant observers and keep us all on our toes. If that doesn't happen, if they think that, okay, now we have made a change and the Rajapaksa family has been dumped, and then they go to sleep, then they will come back. So it's up to the citizenry.
Because they say people in Sri Lanka forget very fast, Suman.
Yeah, they do. But what has happened right now is not something that we have seen ever before. So I would like to think
change in the right direction now.
As an eternal optimist, which to a fault I am, that this is a permanent change and a welcome change, and that it will stay.
And here you go, you have the Prime Minister trying to take the Rajapaksa baby from the broken bridge from one corner to the other.
Well, I don't think he'll succeed in that.
Only time will tell. We'll have to wait and see. We're going for a short commercial break. This is Face the Nation. We are in conversation with Mr. M. A. Sumandiran, Mr. Rauf Hakim, and also Mr. Mano Ganeshan. And we're going for a short commercial break. When we come back on the other side, it's the final round. Stay connected. Stay with Face the Nation. We will be right back.
තනිව යන්න බෑයි කියන කාරණේද අධ්‍යාපනයේදී මම කියන්නේ ප්‍රධාන වශයෙන් සිදුවෙන දේ.
අපිට රුසියානු සපත්තුව මේ ලංකාවට දාන්න බෑ ඒක ලොකුයි. චීන සපත්තුව සීන සමාජවාදී ඒකත් හරියන්නේ නැහැ. ඒක මේ කකුලට පොඩි. අපි අපේම සපත්තුව මහ ගන්න ඕනේ කියලා.
එක්සත් ජාතීන්ගේ මානව හිමිකම් කවුන්සිලය කියලා කියන්නේ මානව හිමිකම් පිළිබඳව ලෝක පාර්ලිමේන්තුව.
අපි පරිසරය කියන්නේ දෙකක් තිබුණා.
මම ඉස්කෝලේ යන කාලෙත් මේක තුන්වන ලෝකේ රටක්. දැන් මම මැරෙන්න යන කාලෙදි තුන්වන ලෝකේ රටක්.
ආණ්ඩුව රූපාන්තරණය වෙනවා රාජ්‍ය බවට.
එත දෙකේ එත පහේදී තමයි මේ වතු ඔක්කොම නැෂනලයිස් කරේ.
එහෙමයි ධර්මශ්‍රී, රට ගැන විතරක් නෙමෙයි මම ගැනත් මම බය වෙලා ඉන්නේ.
අපනයන කවුද කරන්නේ? කවුද විශ්වවිද්‍යාලයට ගියද? කවුද අපේ ව්‍යාපාර කරන්නේ? විශ්වවිද්‍යාලයට ගියද?
A brand new year, a year of hope, a year of aspirations and people looking for inspiration.
Our software engineers, our IT expertise are, not seconding to anyone.
A proper investigation led by the CID. This will be swept under the carpet.
Understanding about the stock market, the fundamentals, the economy, that is very important.
Entire ownership of this reclaimed land as well as the governance of Port City are all under the government of Sri Lanka.
No planet, no people, no business.
Yes.
And this is the simple thing about Biznomics.
Your weekend's most profitable 60 minutes. Biznomics, Saturday and Sunday at 5 p.m.
Welcome back. This is Face the Nation. We'll start off the final round with Mr. Mano Ganeshan, leader of the Tamil Progressive Alliance and Member of Parliament. The time starts now, the final 3 minutes.
Yes, Shabir, Hazan and Dizan, I must tell you that we spoke much about the change which is happening outside Parliament, which is reflected within the Parliament too. I am very much impressed, as my colleagues here, that I also told sometime before, during this session, that the days which we were anticipating, we were looking for, are slowly but steadily coming in. The Sri Lankanism, which you always were dreaming of, that we always be identifying ourselves as Sinhalese or Tamils or Muslims or Buddhists or Hindus or Christians or people who follow the path of Islam, but not as Sri Lankans. But it has come now. Now also the diversity was rejected by the false nationalists. So, but it's not so now. We are celebrating the diversity. At least we are thinking of it. And then again the rule of law slowly setting in. It is good. And You see, 3 weeks before Shabir, I spoke in the parliament about secularism. I said, I called the monks to go back to temples, and our Hindu Gurukas to go to temples, Hindu temples, Kovils, Imams to get back to mosques, and the reverends to go back to churches. Leave their politics to politicians or the voters. I spoke about the separation between politics and state and religion. I wouldn't have spoken this at least 1 year before. When I spoke this, large number of SLPP MPs are seated there. Some of them supported me. I even looked back when where this Reverend Venerable Ratna Amuduru, the MP, the one and only monk MP who was remaining in the parliament, but he was not there. I looked at his seat and said, he should be the last monk MP in this parliament. I said, I should pray for that. I said, and nobody objected me. Even that when my speech was reported in the social media, large number of Sinhala Buddhists supported me. Positive response I got. So that is the change. Secularism, rule of law, diversity, Sri Lankanism. So time is coming in, slowly setting in. It's good. I'm happy about it. That is what this protest movement has brought in. And defeating the false nationalism on which Gotabaya Rajapaksa government came in. That is the contradiction is this, that Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe, who is supposed to be a liberal, who is the Prime Minister here. So he is not part of that, as I said earlier, a little while ago. He is not part of the 6.9 million.
Right.
Fine.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vano Ganeshan, leader of the Tamil Progressive Alliance and Member of Parliament. I now move my attention to Mr. M.A. Sumandiran, President's Council, Member of Parliament representing the Tamil National Alliance.
See, this country has faced 3-decade-old civil war. That has been the biggest issue that the country has faced up to now. Now we are facing an unprecedented economic crisis that the country never saw before. There's a close connection between the two. The wartime borrowings are the ones that caused the country to be indebted so much. There was no accounting, there was no questions, everything was done in secrecy because of military hardware purchases had to be kept that way. Now why did that have to happen? That happened because the promises made to the Tamil people of this country were not kept. Promises made in writing and signed. In 1957, Badda-Chelva Pact, 1965, Dudley-Chelva Pact. If those written commitments had been honoured, this war would never have come into being. So it's a failure on the part of the leaders of this country in keeping their promises that caused us to fight a war in which citizens of this country, in their thousands, in tens of thousands, over 100,000 gave their life. That issue is yet to be settled. Now we are facing an economic crisis. During these war years, several people, more than 1 million of our people left the shores. Now they are in foreign countries doing very well. There is a proposal that if they come back and invest here and bring foreign exchange for investment, that's a quick fix for this country to recover from the economic crisis that it is in. And I can assure you that perhaps that section of the diaspora's economy is much larger than the Sri Lankan economy. All that needs to be fixed is that we must have a new social contract by way of a new constitution which subscribes to the values that Mr. Mano Ganeshan just stated. If we can have that and share power with all the different peoples of this country equally, and they can determine their destiny in the areas in which they live, then we will have a country that is prosperous, because all of those who left this country because of violence against them will come back, and will come back with a lot of money.
Thank you very much, Mr. M. Sumandaran, President's Council, Member of Parliament from the Tamil National Alliance. I now move my attention to Mr. Rauf Hakeem, leader of the Sri Lanka Muslim Congress and also Member of Parliament.
Yes, I wonder whether it was Montesquieu or some French philosopher who said, man is born free, but is in chains everywhere. Having said that, within 10 years, the Bastille was broken and prisoners were freed. That started the French Revolution. Now, similar revolution is taking place here in a different context, in a different way, because of the failure of the political establishment in this country. And one reason for the failure, as we can see, is total irresponsible and inefficient governance by the Rajapaksas, as we all have now amply demonstrated. Now, to fight the war, they started, when they didn't have sufficient budgeted funds, they started this issuing of the international sovereign bonds and the Sri Lanka development bonds. And having taken the money, not only did they pursue war, but they also spent it on unproductive public infrastructure. And that is what led into this mess. And if you see the monies that have been spent on totally unproductive public infrastructure, it is it defies logic. And in that situation, let us also look at the future of any family legacy in this country. I am not going to say simply whether it is the Bandaranayakas or the Rajapaksas or the Vikramasinghes or anyone for that matter, or the Premadasas. You see, the family legacies, if they are to have a revival, they have to learn from history. They have to see how the new generation is looking at things. And there was this famous saying by Jawaharlal Nehru, who said, the communalism of the minorities is very undesirable, but it will peter out one day or the other. But the communalism of the majority is more dangerous. Why? Because it wears the garb of nationalism. And that saying is true to this day. Right? So Nehruvian politics may have seen some eclipse today in India, but then what Jawaharlal Nehru said is true in the context of Sri Lanka. And that has come to light, and that is why I want to remind the words of Mark Twain. He said, patriotism is the last refuge of the scoundrel. So patriotism has been used as a garb to cover various things in this country. That has now been rejected by the people on the ground. They see the fallacy for what it is. So the new generation is looking at things anew, and they have come together even in Galle-Face to celebrate the dead, not only among the soldiers, but also among those in the LTT. And with that message, we have a very, very strong legacy that is now beginning to take shape. So let us all bow down to the wishes of the people and revive this country from its economic morass. For us, let us forget for the time being petty partisan politics and get together to solve the economic problems by agreeing on some mechanism for the short term until we face an election.
Right. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us this evening on the show. Mr. Mano Ganeshan, leader of the Tamil Progressive Alliance and Member of Parliament. Mr. Rauf Hakeem, leader of the Sri Lanka Muslim Congress and Member of Parliament. Mr. M.A. Sumandiran, President's Council and Member of Parliament representing the Tamil National Alliance. As I said to you earlier on in the show, we did invite Minister of Land and Tourism, Harin Fernando, a week ago. He confirmed that he would be attending tonight's show. However, just this morning, the minister decided, for best reasons known to him, not to attend the show. As I said before, time and tide wait for no man. Thank you very much, Hassan. Thank you very much, Deshan, for joining us this evening on Face the Nation. And thank you very much, Shehan, behind the show, putting up a good panel as always. It was insightful, and it was very much insightful to the premise that people would understand what these political party representatives are trying to tell, not only to the people, but also to the government in play. Keep the faith. The most amazing things in life tend to happen right at the moment you are about to give up. As Mr. Hakim quoted from the French philosopher Monteric, I will also quote from him when I finish the show tonight. An empire founded by war has to maintain itself by war. Take care and good night.